All right, folks. Matt M. Roy back. Yeah, long time no see, right? Well, I want to try and give this chat window one more go. I don't know what's going on. The chats are definitely enabled. Let's see if it works this time. Yes, awesome. The chat is working. Thank you to Victor De La Fuente. Let me turn this gain back down. The chat was enabled both other times as well. But for whatever reason, YouTube just the chat wasn't working. For whatever reason, it kept telling me it was disabled too. I don't know what in the world was going on. Okay. So what I want to do here is try to answer everybody's questions. Hopefully, most of you stick around for this part. If not, that's fine. That's the way it is with live streams. Sometimes they work out well, other times not so much. So, for those of you that just saw the last rebuild video, I took a Dell Optiplex. In this case, was a 7020 and 3020. Sorry, 3020, and I went ahead and rebuilt it. So Victor Del Fuente kept saying child safety when I tried to enter something in the chat. Yeah, again, it was disabled. Something was going on on YouTube side, but we're live now. You guys can ask me your questions. I'm curious to know what you guys thought about it. Those of you that saw the live build. A lot of you have been asking me for a long time, Matt, what is it that you actually do on a regular basis with your computers? Well, you just got a taste of it. That is pretty much what I do on the hardware side of things. That's how I prepare a computer and rebuild it for the next user. Now, that's only half of it. The other half is putting all the software on. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in a separate live stream, maybe in the next couple of days. And it may not even be with that computer either. Maybe we'll switch it up a little bit. Maybe I'll go ahead and do it with a one of the Core i5s that I don't have done yet, that's buried deep in that closet back there. Hey, Chris Garrett thinks the groundhog is messing YouTube chat up. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if you guys watched Eric's video earlier. He got an audio kit for his GoPro Hero 5, and he didn't have the right connector. Apparently what it had on it was the old round one for like the Hero 2 and 3s, and he actually needed the connector for the Hero 5, which if I remember correctly, it's just the micro USB. But stuff like that happens sometimes, so we just kind of got to figure out a way to move on. So yeah, let me know. Again, I see we got 10 people here now. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions about what I just did there. Mainly, this is something that I not only enjoy doing, but can be profitable. Now, being said, during that video, I went ahead and gave you guys some options when it comes to putting components in. Now, one thing I didn't say is the memory and the conventional hard drive that I used in that computer came from that whole lot of computers. Basically, when I first got it, I took all the RAM out, put it in my little case there, and I went ahead and I'm doling it out, usually 8 gigs at a time. So I want to make sure every one of these computers has at least 8 gigs of memory. That being said, I did add in the SSD drive, which is something I do with almost all computers I rebuild now. People want them, they need them, so I make sure that they have them. But everything else in there came with that lot of computers. Eric goes, I was expecting 8 p.m. to have my phone on mute because I was filming. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was getting pretty tired. We had a busy day, and I said, you know what? I better start this thing at 7 just in case I started to get really tired. Luckily, I didn't. I actually got my second win, so that actually worked out pretty well. Mark Coveney goes, hey, Matt, my Dell Optiplex 9010 needs to have the 1 terabyte hard drive replaced. I can't afford an SSD. What do I do? Well, what you want to do again is get an SSD. You have a lot of options out there. You don't need a big SSD. If all you're going to be doing is using it for like internet access, and you're doing everything in the cloud, really all you need is something like 120 gig SSD, which you can get at Best Buy for $21.99. They have a PNY CS900 120 gig SSD, which is $22. So after tax, it might be 24. Was the Windows 8 in good shape? If you're referring to the computer tower I did, yes. All of these towers, for the most part, were in really good shape. There were a few that had some deep scratches, and I wanted to show that. But basically, my cheap and very easy fix for deep scratches in these computers, you go to Dollar Tree, and you get yourself some of these Jot branded, that's kind of like Dollar Tree's house brand, permanent markers. You can get the thick ones like this, which work for a lot of the computers. These are kind of like what you probably used as a kid in school. But if you have like finer scratches where these won't get in and fill them in, then just use a good old Sharpie. Or in a cheapskate's case, a super Sharpie, which is actually one of the ones I have. This one is actually a legitimate Sharpie, but if you go to some of the dollar stores, you can get the super Sharpies, which are like the cheap Chinese knockoffs that actually work almost as well. They don't quite last as long, but they're a lot cheaper. Mr. Jimmy goes, I hate those laptops that come with 32 gigabytes. That's way too small for Windows 10 when you do updates. Yes, I agree. And a lot of them are doing that, though most of them are at least getting being upgraded to 64 or in some cases 128 gigabytes. But another problem with those laptops, that memory is not replaceable. In the majority of cases, that memory is soldered onto the motherboard. So you really can't upgrade it. Something like the HP Stream laptops, the only option is to put in like a SD card, because they do have SD card slots. And that's what I had to do with the one that I got. I actually put in a 128 gig SD card, and that actually worked. I mean, it was a cheap and easy fix, and yeah, I had no problems after that. Mark Covington, I'm looking to load a lot of music, photos, videos, etc., and also go online on this computer. Okay. I'm not sure if you watch the live stream, but then your best bet is to keep that 1 terabyte hard drive if it's still in good shape, and just add an SSD, because you can have all of your music, your pictures, your documents on that 1 terabyte drive, and just use the SSD for the boot drive. Yeah, 32 gigabytes is way too small for Windows 10. I've never actually seen one that had only 32 gigabytes, at least not a Windows 10 system. I've seen some like Windows 8 and Windows RT computers that only had 32 gigabytes of storage space, but I think the smallest Windows 10 installation is going to take at least 64 gigs. So realistically, you need at least that 128 gigs of solid state memory. Excuse me, folks. I need to go ahead and grab my bottled water here. All that talking is drying my mouth out again. Oh, actually had a salad for dinner tonight. Not necessarily to arbitrarily change topics here, but I've actually been about my lifestyle change recently. I haven't gained weight, but haven't really been losing weight either. So I'm trying to get healthier again, though. I will tell you, ever since I started eating a little bit junkier foods, now I'm still eating healthy, but I'm adding some of the junkier things in, like I'll have a bowl of ice cream during the day and maybe a few chocolate truffles. I'm more regular now, so that's definitely been a plus. Wow. Mr. Jimmy said the HP Stream 11-Y011F Very poor choice of model number there, to be honest with you. Has only 32 gigabytes of storage running Windows 10. Wow. I've never seen it. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but I've just never seen it myself. Victor De La Fuente, have you ever owned a Windows 95 system, Matt? Oh, yeah. I've many in the past. Not so much anymore. I think my only system I have running Windows 95 is an old Gateway Essentials PC that is now in the storage behind me here and hasn't probably seen the light of day in the last 3 to 5 years. All right, so we're kind of off topic right now. I want you guys out there, we got 13 people here right now. I want to know, do you have any specific questions, any more actually, about that computer build? Because I get a lot of people asking me about this privately and sometimes in the live streams. I want you guys to get all the questions out now. This is the easiest way for me to go ahead and answer everybody's questions, all at once. Mark Covington asks, can I also use a 1 terabyte SSD hard drive as a main drive and then maybe a 1 or a 2 terabyte conventional hard drive as a second drive? Yes, you can do that. Though a 1 terabyte SSD is going to run you about $130 to $160. So financially, it doesn't make the best sense. When it comes to archival storage, i.e., storage for music, documents, pictures, things like that, you really don't need to have that stuff stored on solid state memory. As a matter of fact, you're better off storing that on a conventional hard drive or even in the cloud. Either way, it works fine, but money wise, you'll be spending a lot of greenbacks to store all that archival data on SSD, because SSDs, even though they have come down in price in recent years, they still cost per gigabyte quite a bit more than your conventional storage options. Nice. Ray Sanchez said he scored himself for 500. What is it? A MacBook Air for $500 at Best Buy. 8 gigs of RAM, a 128 gig SSD, and a Core i5 processor. Okay, that's not bad. Again, though, I'm not a Mac guy, so I don't know how much space OS 10, what is it now, Mavericks or whatever the new one is going to use of that. But I do know with the MacBooks, it's very hard to get additional storage. They want you to bring that back to the Apple Store to go ahead and add more storage to it. But of course, you always have other options. You can even get one of these nano USB flash drives that are no bigger than, I don't have a nano receiver in front of me, but like no bigger than maybe that, like a tiny little paper clip. And they can be up to 256 gig or 512 gig. You just keep that in your computer and it's decently fast. Now, is it going to be as fast as accessing SSD storage? No, but it's still going to be faster than conventional hard drive. So that's a good option if you need more storage for that MacBook. Mark Covington, there's someone I know offering to sell me a 1 terabyte SSD hard drive plus a bracket for only $99. That's a good deal. Just make sure that it is new. You do not, I'm going to repeat this, you do not want to buy solid state hard drives used. I've been burned way too many times that way. A lot of times people don't know you're not supposed to defrag solid state hard drives. And I'm going to say it here, don't defrag your solid state memory. You're going to destroy it. And a lot of times people do that, realize they damaged it, and they'll go ahead and resell it to people that don't know any better. So if you're going to buy a solid state hard drive, buy it brand new. You're going to get burned. I can almost guarantee you if you buy it used. Gorilla Face Gwen. I will say I run an open case, but my CPU, GPU are water blocked. Have run the same setup for the last 5 years with no issues whatsoever. Okay. Well, again, when you talk about your system being, water blocked, water cooled, that's a whole different ball game. That's some same process as having a radiator on your car. It does a significantly better job at keeping your computer cool versus the conventional just heatsink and fan. That case, you would be able to keep the side cover off. But I'm talking about in general, if you have a standard computer that's not water cooled, it's best to have it sealed. In other words, to have the side case on, make sure you have all your blanking plates in for the expansion slots. That's just best practice, is what we like to call it in the tech industry. Mr. Jimmy, SSD versus M2 SATA, which is also another form of SSD. What is better? It's a good question. The M2 is a surface or a motherboard mounted solid state drive. The benefit to that is you don't use one of your drive rails to put that in. So basically, if your computer has the capacity to have 2 hard drives and the M2, then you can physically have 2 other hard drives and that M2 SATA SSD. Now, that being said, the M2s and the M SATAs, the surface mount SSDs, can suffer from overheating problems if your computer is not properly cooled. But that is far and few between. I actually run an older M SATA SSD in this computer, my Dell XPS 8700. Had it in there now for the last 3 years, and it runs perfectly fine. As a general rule, if you have an M2 or an M SATA SSD slots in your computer, I would suggest using it because, once again, there's really no downside. You will free up more space to add additional hard drives to your computer in the future. Excuse me one second. A little bit of an itchy nose there. Eric's Variety Channel, I'm back. Sorry, I'm still working on this video, but now I am sitting down eating. That's all right. Don't forget to eat. Just don't eat too late. Remember my rule of thumb. I try to discourage eating after 4 or 5 p.m., though. That's just me, and that always helps me keep the weight off. Eric goes, M.2 SATA is pretty much the same as SATA, but NVMe is different. Correct. And if correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the older M SATA drives actually used NVMe, but the M.2s can use NVMe and usually do. Chris Garrett, yes. The M.2 drives basically look like a memory module. They're almost about the same size. They're a little bit longer, a little bit wider, and instead of having the pins all along the length of it, they're just on the bottom, and they're usually about maybe that wide. And the way you actually install it in most cases is you actually do it in an angle, similar to the old Sims you would find like in 90s, 80s, and 90s computers. You put it in an angle, and then you actually push it down, and there's usually a screw or 2 screws that actually hold it in place on the motherboard, and that's really all you have to do. Okay, good. I guess I was right on that. I wasn't 100% sure, and I'm not the kind of person that's gonna sit there and lie to you guys. If I don't know something for sure, I will say I don't know it for sure. Mr. Jimmy, I miss my old 8 gig Quantum Bigfoot hard drive. Oh boy, did I have a few of those back in the day. Now, was yours the true Bigfoot that was the 5 1/4 inch size, or the newer ones that they shrunk down to the normal 3 1/2 inch? I had both, and they were both very good drives, though I would say the older 5 1/4 inch ones that came in the compacts, they did tend to fail after a while, and I think that was due to the fact that they were compressing the platters down in size to fit it, and I think the motors had a lot of extra stress because instead of the platters being like this size, they were more like the size of maybe a 12-inch 45 LP or a 45 record. So the bigger the platters are, the more stress you have on that stepper motor, and eventually they just decided to fail in my cases anyway. Ray Sanchez, difference between DDR3 and DDR4. Would 8 gigabytes of DDR4 be better than my 16 gigabytes of DDR3? That is almost impossible to answer because I'd have to know what the latency of the memory is. Some DDR4 and DDR3 sticks, believe it or not, actually run at almost identical speeds. But as a rule of thumb, if it was in my personal computer, I would rather have 16 gigabytes of DDR3 than 8 gigabytes of DDR4. Chances are your computer would still run better that way. Chris goes, I have the 8 gig, 5.25-inch quantum fire Bigfoot drives, I assume. And he goes, they are good, just slow. It came out of a compact. I remember them all being in compacts. I'm not saying other computers at the time didn't use them, but every one that I ever saw was always in one of those compact Rosarios, the white ones that were like the bubble towers that had, some of them had the front USB ports. One of the first computers on the market that did was toward the bottom, and you would actually lift the little bubble up and you'd have the two front USB ports. And in the real early ones, they weren't USB ports. You would lift that up and it would actually be a 9-pin game port. No problem, Ray. Always glad to help out. Mark Covington asks, hey, Matt, what computer of yours would you say lasted you the longest? What computer was it? Ooh. Boy, honestly, if I had to say, it would probably be this one right here, the Dell XPS 8700. I've had that since 2014, so it's 6 years old now, and it's still running strong. I would love to replace it when funds allow. I don't know when that's going to be, but for now, this is rocking a 4th gen i7, and really can't complain. It's been a rock solid, reliable computer. About the only glitch I ever had with it, the original memory went bad for some reason. It started throwing up random errors, and I ran memtest, and they tested bad, so I replaced it with Crucial Ballistic XM2 stick, something like that, and ever since then, it's been really reliable. Anything before 2003, yeah, to be honest with you, the pre-built systems of the late 90s and early 2000s, for me at least, were not all that reliable. Probably my Dell Dimension XPS D233, my DOS gaming computer, was probably the next most reliable, although it is down right now. It's got a bad power supply, which I have not had the time to address that yet. Hey, another fodder for another video for sure. Yeah, Dabbler was asking about it being age restricted. I don't know why. I had it set up properly. I double and triple checked that. For some reason, it was just glitching out, but at least you guys got to see the video. And honestly, I like the way it worked out, because I'd rather just, with that type of live stream, I'd rather just do the stream, have you guys watch it, not have to answer the questions, because if I do that, then I kind of get sidetracked. And then later on, just do something like this, a Q&A. So this actually worked out a lot better, honestly. Scott Keeley, the only PC for me was the compact socket 470 Celeron. There were a lot of those sold back in the day. Then we're going back to the late 90s, maybe very early 2000s. After that, there was like the ones based on the Pentium 4, and they were not as reliable, and they were slower, actually. Dad's doing fine. He's downstairs, probably going to be heading to bed soon, because we're going to try to go to church tomorrow. I know we have not been great about that lately. It's kind of been hit and miss, especially with his surgery and everything. 1998. Yeah, I kind of figured it. Late 90s, those 470s were around. That's all right, Eric. I don't take roll call. I do this because you guys seem to enjoy it. Honestly, It's easier for me just to build the computers. And, I tend to be kind of a loner sometimes. So that kind of live stream was hard for me, to be honest with you. I'd actually prefer just sitting here chatting than having to walk around and do that kind of live stream. But you know what? If you enjoy it, make sure you give me some thumbs up. Let me go in there and see how that actual stream went. I know I had quite a few dislikes, and I think that was due to the fact that I had to restart it, but happens that way sometimes. What are we at right now? 20 likes and 7 dislikes. Oh, thank you guys. Some of you guys went back and liked that video. Awesome. I will be doing more of those in the future. I enjoy doing it, honestly, and I think you guys really enjoyed it too. I'd like to try to get a better setup. Maybe not using the webcam, although I have to say this Logitech Webcam Pro C922 streaming webcam did a great job. I actually thought the focus was decent. I'm asking this webcam to do something it's really not designed to do, and it worked out like a champ. So good Logitech webcam. Good Logitech. Compaq died after 2001. That is true, but even after HP took it over, they actually still use the name, at least here in the States. I remember seeing Compaq computers sold up until about 2009, 2010, when HP killed it off altogether. Chris Garrett goes, the build video was as good as Kerry Holzman's. You don't need that fancy stuff. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Wow. Okay. Wow. If it's as good as Kerry Holzman's videos, then I need to do more of these, because I've seen his subscriber count, and he has really shot up in recent months. Garrett Bolton, Matt, how often do you replace CPUs? Honestly, not that often, because most of the time in my business, when I get computers in, I usually keep the same CPU in it that they came with. That being said, recently, especially with these massive computer halls, in at least a few of them, I usually do upgrade the CPUs. So if I'd give you an average, maybe 5 to 10 a year, something like that. Yeah, in the client PCs. In my own PCs, hardly ever, and that's just because whenever I get a computer or build a computer that I use, I build it to the specs that I want. So usually I won't have to ever upgrade them, at least not the CPU. I might add memory, change out the video cards, upgrade the optical drives, and maybe even go as far as putting new SSDs in them. But when it comes to the actual CPU in my own computers, very rarely do I ever upgrade them. That's just me. I just don't find a need for it. Nick Roberts, I miss IBM from the 90s. Their laptops were made like a tank. Oh, don't I know it? I have that old IBM 5000 series laptop from 1997. As a matter of fact, I actually found it in the closet the other day. I'll have to bring that out and show you guys. That's still rocking the original battery that still holds about a 50% charge. That is amazing, in my opinion. Thank you, Mark, for the $2 super chat. Always, always appreciated. Dabbler's Buffet. Hey, Mr. Roy, do you know that there are some LGA 775 motherboard support 8 gigs of RAM? A few of them support 16. Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, the computer I was using over there, that Dell Inspiron 530, that had a LGA 775 Core 2 Duo, and that actually would physically support 16 gigabytes of RAM with the latest BIOS update. That is one thing I did want to add. One other thing I do to all of my rebuilds, I always update the BIOS, especially if they are Dell Optiplexes or like the Compaq Pro series. But if I'm rebuilding a computer that's like a consumer grade system, then I usually won't upgrade the BIOS, because it's usually a little bit more of a headache to do it and can actually cause more problems. And if it's like a a custom built system with something like an off the shelf Asus or an AROC motherboard or an 8-bit motherboard, something like that, I will only update the BIOS if there is a problem, because I've actually bricked motherboards like that in the past. Very easy to do because they're not as reliable when it comes to the BIOS updates. I'm not even familiar with socket T's, honestly. I'll be honest with you guys. I have not been to school, at least college, in quite some time. So when it comes to the real latest computer technology, some of that I am not that well versed on. I really need to take some classes again. Hopefully, going to get to that in the very near future when I get when I get all these other things off my plate. I think they support it, but Windows only sees 8 gigs due to BIOS limitations. You might be right. To be honest with you, I only ever had 8 gigs in those Inspiron 530, 531s, but you might be right about that. I'd actually have to test that in a real world environment to be sure. Once again, if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to tell you I don't know for sure. Really? 775 is socket T. Interesting. I always knew it as LGA 775. You learn something new every day. Have I ever used Nick Roberts, by the way, have I ever used a server as a desktop PC? Not personally. I have serviced servers in the past, companies that were using them as desktops, but generally they're just too noisy. And in this day and age, you can get desktop workstations that are every bit as powerful as a lot of servers out there. Mark Covington, hey Matt, what would you say is your all-time favorite Dell computer? Again, I'm actually, I'm gonna augment that. I was gonna say this XPS 8700, and I'm gonna have to go with not a specific Dell computer, but I'm gonna have to say pretty much any Dell Optiplex. I really can't say anything bad about the Dell Optiplex series, except maybe for the Optiplex 755 and 745 and some of the early 760s, which suffered from early motherboard failures. Other than that, they are rock solid, reliable computers. I would recommend one to anybody because they almost will last indefinitely. Eric's Variety Channel. Before my old system, I ran a Q6600 with 16 gigabytes of DDR3. Yes, we do forget there were some LGA 775 computers out there that actually ran DDR3. We think of the majority of them using DDR2, but yeah, there were some out there that used DDR3. The Core 2 Quad Q6600 was a great processor, still is. I mean, that particular system will run the latest build of Windows 10, no problem at all. And if you pair it with a high-end graphics card, I would put that up against some of the more modern i3s and i5s. Although, when it comes to doing video rendering and like AutoCAD, it will not be as good because it does not have the same instruction sets that the more modern processors do. Garrett Bolton, thanks for the answer. Interesting to find out your scenario about CPU upgrading for your refurbishments. My last question, I would like to know your opinion as what your thoughts are on AMD versus Intel. Okay. I have nothing against AMD. As a matter of fact, as a rule, when I first got into the game, I preferred AMD because it was cheaper. And this was back during the AMD Athlon days, not the Athlon XPs. We're going even back further, the original AMD Athlons. Yes, they did run hotter, and you needed to compensate for that by having a beefier CPU and case cooler. But on the whole, I enjoyed using them back then because they were cheaper. I mean, I could build computers a lot faster and a lot cheaper back then. That being said, nowadays it's really hard. I mean, I have to say I like both companies for different reasons. Intel definitely has, in my opinion, the stability down pat. Their processors are reliable. AMD actually has a slight speed boost over Intel now with the Ryzen chips. Believe it or not, they're actually a little bit above Intel, unless you're talking about like the crazy expensive Intel i9s with like the 64 processors in them. For the general consumer, the Ryzen is going to be the cheaper and a way to get a much faster computer. Now, that being said, in my experience, AMD still does lack the reliability factor. I do know some people out there that have Ryzen computers, computer builds that are not necessarily happy. They do have issues sometimes with intermittent BSODs, blue screens of death, that are usually down to intermittent issues with the CPU. So I guess you could say the quality control at Intel is still a little bit better, but AMD's catching up, folks. I would not be surprised to see AMD overtaking Intel in every aspect in the near future. Scott Kearley's a AMD fan, apparently. The only Intel system he has is a Optiplex i90 i5 2500K and a Vostro 220 with an E8500, both great processors. Rest is AMD. Chris Garrett, used to AMD and Intel use same socket 7. Yep, that's right. That was the K62 era. You could change to an Intel. Yeah, you could with most motherboards, but I remember certain ones back then were BIOS locked to a specific brand. So you had to be careful. Not all motherboards back then were. As a matter of fact, I'll go back even further than that. Back in the late 90s, you had 3 different ones. You could use an AMD in the socket 7, or Super Socket 7 it was called back then. It could be an AMD, an Intel, or a Cyrix chips. How many of you guys remember Cyrix back in the day? That was another big brand that faded out into oblivion right around the turn of the new millennium. We got Sonic Wang here. Q6600 is my favorite CPU of all time. It can be bought for less than $10 US dollars. You can get a PC that supports that CPU for next to nothing, and you can even game on it depending on your GPU. Absolutely, I agree with that statement. And with that, I am going to have to end this chat because it is getting on to 8:30. I need to go ahead and take my medicine for tonight. I got to take some Benadryl. My allergies really bothering me. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely look forward to more videos like this coming in the near future. Thank you for coming to this post Q&A live stream rebuild chat. Please continue to like and subscribe. And as always, have a blessed day, everybody.